What's going on, everyone? So today we're talking about top 10 musket cards for set 3. Now, in order to kind of curate this list and go through all the cards in Star Wars Unlimited, I wanted to pick cards that weren't extremely obvious in terms of, okay, get your Darth Vaders or get your Luke Skywalkers or whatever. Cards that have been like extremely meta. These are cards that most often are rares or legendaries that are on the cheaper side because they haven't really found a home. However, with set 3, there is a very good chance that they will end up getting a lot better for one reason or another, and that's why I've considered them the must get, because they are kind of at a bargain right now in some cases. They're still, well, legendaries in some cases, so they still can run a little bit of a price, but that's what we're here to talk about today. And of course, you can let me know if you disagree in the comment section down below. Before we dive into the list, two small announcements. I have a TCG play link in the description down below that you guys can use to pick up any of the cards we're going to talk about today or for set 3. And big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. We've been chatting in the Discord, talking about the new cards, and it's been a ton of fun. Let's dive into the first card. Into our first card, we have Bombing Run. 5-cost event in Aggression. Pretty simple. Choose an arena, deal 3 damage to each unit in that arena. This is currently a rare, and it's a pretty cheap one, and that's mainly because it really hasn't found a spot in the more soft control or even hard control lists. I immediately think Vader Blue, as it's the deck that I did run Bombing Run in within set 1 for a sideboard slot. But to be honest, it never really performed amazingly. In set 3, we are expecting a ton of tokens, Battle Droid tokens, Clone Trooper tokens, and if those cards ever become something that's pretty strong, well, soft control or hard control could potentially just absolutely decimate them with a single card, and that is Bombing Run. So if there's going to be cards that create multiple units, create a Clone Trooper token or whatever, or maybe there's even aggro decks that are flooding the board a lot because you have more 1-drops, 2-drops, earlier plays. Bombing Run is going to be a card that gets better and better and better. It's not limited to either arena. It's both space and ground arena counters. So if we have more space decks that are going all space, Bombing Run's great there. If we have, well, ground decks that are going Clone Trooper tokens or Battle Droid tokens, it's going to be great there. But it's just relegated to those specific scenarios, right? Bombing Run is a card that is usually taking out at least a unit from your opponent, something a little bit on the weaker side in terms of toughness. And if you do combo this with any sort of damaging abilities or anything like that, maybe you get higher toughness units. So if you're just playing against a deck, maybe a standard aggro deck, but they have a couple of units that go a little bit wider, or a couple of units that have that low toughness because maybe they create a couple of different units. I don't know, some card from set 3 that comes down is a little bit lower stat, but it creates 2 bodies. Well, this card is going to be good there also because it's going to be able to kill 2 or the 2 bodies that it put down with just 1 card, which might be a little bit tough for some other control cards to be doing, right? Power of the Dark Side looks increasingly worse with set 3. Next card we're going to talk about is Wild Rancor. Now, this is very similar to Bombing Run in that the really exceptional strength of this card is getting at least some sort of value from its when played trigger. It's a 6-cost ground unit in double aggression. It's a 6/8 with Overwhelm, and when you play it, you deal 2 damage to each other ground unit. Now, this is also rare, and we have seen it be played in some top 8 lists with double Red Han, the new Han, because you can get down this on turn 4 at 5 resources as a 6/6. Now, one thing that's really nice about this is that Overwhelm. Overwhelm's great, especially if you're trying to take out small units, get in some damage. That's all great. It's a really nice curve out card for mid-range decks where you're just kind of playing your units that are a little bit higher stats. The 2 damage isn't going to kill those units, but in some cases, maybe you're able to overwhelm over for more damage into your opponent's units. But if you're playing this as like maybe some of the top end of your curve, like your 6-drop in your, let's say, some random double aggression deck, granted, those tend to be a little bit more aggressive, but there can very well be a more mid-ranged focused double aggression deck. Well, we could see this be an absolute counter to certain decks, such as the ones that are using the Battle Droid and Clone Trooper tokens, as I said with Bombing Run. But again, this is a card that's seen a lot of value just kind of throughout the games that I've seen Double Red Han in, because Dealing 2 damage to some other big units as well puts them in range of your smaller units, which might be extremely relevant. Maybe you want to pick off someone that's trying to get some value out of a Sentinel, and they play like an Obi-Wan. You deal 2 damage to it. Suddenly it's a 4/4, and now your K2SO actually trades with it, which is a lot more advantageous. This ends up being a lot more valuable than I initially realized when I start playing this card. And it's been on the overperforming side of things, but it's still not quite good enough to see like absolute meta play because there's not enough double aggression lists that are really viable. So 1, set 3 is going to add a bunch of aggression cards, and 2, it's going to be really good against the token decks, which very similar to Bombing Run. Next one we're going to talk about is Triple Dark Raid. Now, this one is not necessarily a sleeper or anything like that. Not a card that's like Wild Rancor or Bombing Run in that you're not really seeing it mainstream. Triple Dark Raid's talked about quite a bit, but it's not necessarily as good or as, I guess you'd say, well performed as people might think. It doesn't really get into top 8s of tournaments all that frequently. It's not like an insane card, but it does set up a really nice archetype of, well, potentially all space decks or just going in for kind of this like burn effect, essentially, where you're getting this vehicle, getting to attack with it, maybe kill an opponent's units, getting some damage or whatever it is. And this card just gets better and better the more sets we have because you have more options with vehicles. But it looks like set 3 is also just going to have a good amount of vehicles. And what I'm really excited about with this card is if you look at the vehicles that really, really perform amazingly with Triple Dark Raid right now, it's going to be, of course, things like Fet's Fire Spray, Xanadu Blood, in that you just have high cost units that you can pick up. But really the cards that I'm really excited about with Triple Dark Raid, TIE Advanced, Ruthless Raider, those are the cards that make me excited about Triple Dark Raid. Cards that have when played abilities, they come down, they get in damage for you, they leave, but it's okay because they kind of got that value for you on that turn. And with TIE Advanced especially, that's just an amazing, amazing boost of damage on that turn while also boosting your board state. So I'm really excited about set 3 because we should be able to see maybe some vehicles. I could see like troop carriers, from the battle droid side of things, you know, dropping battle droid tokens in, you get a vehicle, it enters play. When played, you make like 3 or 4 battle droid tokens. I could see gunships, making clone trooper tokens. It's mainly going to be battle droid tokens, however, because the clone trooper tokens and the gunships and things like that are going to be heroism. But I could very much expect a lot of separatist ships, separatist droid carriers, things like that. They're going to be dropping in battle droid tokens when you get that vehicle and play it. And those when played triggers can be really amazing with Triple Dark Raid, as I mentioned, things like Ruthless Raider and TIE Advanced. All right, we got to talk about Mace Windu. So this one's been pretty sweet lately. 7 resource, a ground unit in aggression, heroism, 5/7. Check this out. Force Jedi Republic tag. It has battle droids in the art. Despite this being a set 1 legendary, this is definitely a card that was kind of a little bit of a sneak peek towards set 3 is what I would be looking at with this card. And it's also mechanically designed for set 3, which is why I believe it'll get a lot better. This guy comes down, he ambushes, and anytime he attacks and defeats a unit, you get to ready him. Just think about what this does to token boards. Boom, play him, kill a battle droid token, ready him. Kill a battle droid token, ready him. Kill a battle droid token, ready him. Kill a 2/5 that made battle droid tokens before but has a weak stat line, ready him. This guy is going to come down and might just be a one-sided board wipe in set 3 if token decks are popular. Same thing against clone trooper tokens, right? You can kill 3 clone trooper tokens and yet ready him a 4th time to go ahead and get some more value out of him. So this is definitely a card that looks to be designed within the mechanics of set 3. And seeing as he is a legendary from set 1, I would be very surprised if set 3 was it kind of what they expected for Mace Windu to pop off a little bit. It just seems like he's perfectly designed for those scenarios where he's coming down, he's defeating a bunch of units, and then he kind of fizzles off and maybe gets in one final attack against a big unit. But also, he does have relevant tags, right? Force, relevant throughout the entirety of the game so far. But Jedi and Republic especially are really relevant in set 3, whereas beforehand, Jedi was not relevant and Republic not relevant. So this is definitely the set. If he was going to be power boosted, this is the set for him. And He's even popped up a little bit lately within the Han Blue archetype, where he comes down a turn earlier as a 5/5 ambusher and usually knocks out a couple of units as a 6-cost ambusher. So he has shown up a little bit, but I definitely think that for set 3, Mace Windu can be some amazing, or be an amazing addition against those token decks, or just in general against the set 3 cards. And I figure because we're talking about set 1 cards that were looking to be designed for set 3, I think Count Dooku also ends up in that category, and I do think he's going to be getting a lot better come set 3. 7-cost ground unit in Vigilance Villainy, 5/4, pretty meh stat line, I would say, for a 7-cost unit, but he has shielded when he comes down, and you get to defeat a unit with 4 or less remaining HP. Force Separatist Sith. First things first, this card has been played in random spots, even in some of the soft control lists. I've seen it in Kira Green, I've seen it popped up in like Hondo Blue. It's a fine card. It is a card, comes down and defeats something as long as it's got 4 or less remaining HP, which is not infrequent, but that is something that is a little less consistent with Count Dooku specifically, in that right now, if you were to play Count Dooku, there are going to be times where you're not going to be able to get something with 4 or less remaining HP. That trigger is almost always going to have a target come set 3, assuming the token strategies and what you're trying to do with tokens is something that is playable. Not even necessarily meta, but something that might be in decks that you're going to see at tournaments. Not only that, but also, and this is, I think, is going to be the really relevant part, Separatist tag seems to be even more important than the Republic tag in a lot of certain areas. So having a top end threat that does something immediately shielded so it sticks around, and having a okay body, I think is going to be a lot more relevant because of that Separatist tag. As I mentioned, with the Republic tag, yes, that seems to be relevant with things like the Republic Fleet Lieutenant. I forgot what the card's an actual full name is at this point. Our moment where you're able to attack with +2/+0. But there are a lot of cards that we've already seen that actually care, like, oh, get +2/+0 for this attack, or get raid 2 for this attack if you have a Separatist unit on the battlefield. So that's something I think is going to be extremely relevant for Count Dooku, and I could see him being played over some of the other late game value cards because of that tag alone. It binds all things is the next one we got to talk about, and a lot of people don't even know what this card does. It's another rare that's kind of off the radar. You see it every once in a while in those Force, usually Ray Red decks. It's a 2-cost Vigilance event. Heal up to 3 damage from a unit. If you control a Force unit, may deal that much damage to another unit. So realistically, 2 resources to heal 3 damage from a unit, pretty bad. Like, just bad, okay? But if you have a control, or if you have a Force unit, you suddenly maybe be able to heal 2 damage and deal 2 damage to an opponent's unit, or heal 3 damage and then deal 3 to an opponent's unit. That gets a lot stronger, and that's something that's going to be way more common for many reasons. First off, this dealing or healing a couple points of damage, we're going to have smaller units on the battlefield. So being able to heal only a few points of damage and not having your opponent completely kill your unit is very much more possible. But also, you're going to be controlling way more Force units on average. Not only do we have a bunch of Jedi coming for the heroism side, which is just going to be rampant with Force unit users, right? Plo Koon we've already seen, Shock T we've seen, not to mention all the other Force units that we are expecting to see. I think we saw Ahsoka, Anakin, etc. We also are going to have some Force units on the side of the Separatists. Now, this is going to be less common because, well, the Separatist side only had a few Force units to talk about, or at least Villainy side had only a few Force units to talk about frequently. But at least in terms of heroism units, this is going to be kind of trivial to get a Force unit on the battlefield, which also makes things like Force Throw a lot better. But that card's already like super meta. But it binds all things. All of that's going to be something that's going to improve the card. And then the last thing is that dealing 1 to 3 damage is going to be a lot more useful overall if the meta, again, includes token units. If we're going to see units with lower toughness, like Batch Brothers, for example, a 2/1 and a 2/2, well, healing 2 damage, you're actually able to knock out a unit on the battlefield, which is going to be a lot more important going forward. So I'm pretty excited. It binds all things, and hopefully we're gonna get some value out of it. Next one up we got is Supreme Leader Snoke. Now this one's by far the most expensive card on the list, and might not even be a card that is, well, necessarily part of the somewhat restriction I put on at the beginning of the video, which was we don't really want to be talking about cards that people want to be picking up all the time anyways, and this is kind of a pretty solid finisher for the most part in a lot of these villainy, vigilance, soft control decks. However, I had to mention this one because it seems like it was kind of designed with the expectation that tokens were going to be a lot more rampant. It's an 8-cost ground unit in vigilance villainy, 6/6, kind of mediocre stat line, but you don't play it for the stat line, you play it for the ability. It gives each enemy non-leader unit -2/-2. This immediately kills all battle tree tokens, immediately kills all clone trooper tokens, immediately shrinks down any sort of board that's trying to go wide, even if you're not killing it, but most likely will kill it. And it makes it so that your opponent can't really deal damage to your base while also not really be able to get past a lot of your defensive units should you choose to build it that way. I've seen Snoke perform very well even against, decks that are just playing a little bit more aggro and just run out of steam completely. You play a Snoke and they're like, okay, I can't push in damage to your base. I kind of need to deal with Snoke, but I can't deal with Snoke because I don't have the power on the board to do so. This guy really puts the brakes on it, and it seems like if there's any sort of go wide strategy or any sort of way to kind of get around the early game or try to get into the late game against some of these more soft control decks and actually win it out of maybe a surprise, or just having kind of 4, 5, and 6 copies of Super Laser Blast, Snoke is going to be that guy for you. This does again seem like a card that was expecting tokens to come into play. So I talked a lot about punishing tokens, and to be honest, that's something that we're just gonna have to kind of accept, in the fact that tokens, if they're going to be something that's really meta, we have a lot of ways to deal with tokens. So that's just something about to think about. However, Ewing Reinforcement is a card that we've got to talk about. It's actually not a card I've seen all that frequently as of late. There's not really that many green aspect heroism decks outside of Sabine Green, and usually Ewing Reinforcement is relegated to the sideboard, and it's not even a card that I sideboard in all the time. Usually against the bigger decks like Han Blue, you want to be trying to go underneath them. And what I mean by underneath them is try to race them out with early units rather than trying to recuperate your mid to late game with Ewing Reinforcements. However, this 7-cost event in Command Heroism, giving you the ability to search the top 10 cards of your deck for up to 3 units with combined cost 7 or less and playing them, seems to fit this theme of going wide in set 3 and can be a really nice finisher for your deck. Because you don't just need to, go wide. You also need to finish off your opponent. And this is a way where you could actually just get, let's say, 3 units, like a 2-drop, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop, get them into play, and then maybe they're even creating more stuff, or maybe you have some other way to bump up all of your coordinate units through just playing a bunch of cheap units in your deck, and Ewing Reinforcements will be able to immediately trigger coordinate if you get 3 units from your deck. So there's a lot of different reasons for this card, but again, it seems like a very, very good finisher, as it already has been in some decks, a very, very good finisher to kind of just flood the board or get some massive unit that costs 7, get into play, but have that selection to be able to do so. So Ewing Reinforcements has already been pretty good. This is another card that, again, might be on the side of Snoke, where people know how good this card is, but we really haven't seen it all that frequently, and I do think it'll make a resurgence in set 3. We got 2 more to talk about, and the next one is The Force is With Me. So I spoke a lot about It Binds All Things, and this is kind of going down a similar path as that. 4-cost event in Vigilance Heroism. You choose a friendly unit, give 2 experience tokens to it, just straight up. If you control a Force unit, also give a shield token to the chosen unit. You may attack with the chosen unit. So if you look at this card and you don't have the Force clause, you get 2 experience tokens to a unit, and then you may attack with it. That's not that strong. The power of The Force is With Me is pumping up a Force unit, getting in and maybe trading up, like let's say you play a 4-5 and you kill their 5-5 because you're able to give 2 experience tokens to that unit and not taking a single point of damage. This almost immediately gives you complete board control because it gives you enough power to start actually just potentially killing your opponent's later game plays without even losing this unit. One of the biggest things that really swings a game for me is anytime I have something like a Kanan or a Yoda and I get a forces with me off in that point in the game. Doesn't even have to be later on in the game with like Luke Skywalker's or Obi-Wan's, but just having like a Kanan survive and be super high power and toughness is extremely relevant. And with set 3, we're going to have, again, so many force units to be able to make this extremely consistent. Basically, any deck that I've played the forces with me, I have gravitated towards 1 to 2 copies because I felt like playing the full 3 of, I did not want to be drawing them all the time. And even when I did draw them, there wasn't enough spots to where it was exceptional for me to put more copies in my deck. But when it does get off where you have a force unit that survived that turn, you have the forces with me, you're able to attack, suddenly this card is one of the best cards in your entire deck. And that's not going to be uncommon come set 3, where we're going to be playing potentially force units on every single point of the curve. Like that is very, very possible, at least in heroism. And you thought we were done with punishing token strategies, but we got to talk about one last card on the list, and that is Gideon Hask. 5-cost ground unit in Vigilance Villainy, 5-5 Imperial Trooper. When an enemy unit is defeated, give an experience token to a friendly unit. It's a pretty straightforward card and already does a good amount of work. Usually seen in Kira Green. That's most commonly where I see Gideon, and in set 1 it definitely was a card that was one of the best cards in your deck when you're playing Iden, for example. But this is a card, 5-cost 5-5, kind of solid stat lines, not like extremely exciting as we have 5-cost 6/6s now, so I guess you could say a little bit below average when you're comparing rares and legendaries. But this ability to give an experience token to a friendly unit can get out of hand very quickly if your opponent's going wide. You kill a battle droid token, suddenly you get a +1/+1 counter. That is insane. All right, an experience token, which gives you +1/+1 on a certain unit. And you can just keep repeating this over and over and over again. Like, let's say you have a couple units on the battlefield and your opponent has a couple units. Well, guess what? You kill a unit, you get an experience token. You kill another unit, you get another experience token. You kill another unit, you get another experience token. And it just keeps going on and on and on. Gideon, when you're playing these soft control lists, or maybe you're just playing kind of a curve out Vigilance Villainy deck with like Child Sin Gideons and things like that, you get down a Child Sim, you play Gideon, and suddenly your Child Sin's a 6/6, but is really, really hard to get past. So all those small units that your opponent has, either they don't attack, and you're fine because you're playing a more mid-range curve out deck in Vigilance, or they're going to attack and you're going to get a ton of experience tokens. So again, another card that has been just good in a lot of situations, but I think will get better if your opponent's playing any sort of tokens come set 3. So we've talked a lot about token and hate and all that type of shenanigans of a lot of the cards. We've also talked about a few advantages with force units and some other stuff regarding going wide and coordinate. I think the biggest thing in this set is it's going to require a lot of setup. And with all the potential hate that we have with, well, the cards that I talked about today, or even things that we might be playing more of because of the tokens, it's going to be really tricky to balance the whole meta. And I'm really curious. This is probably one of the hardest points to evaluate because we're so early on in Star Wars career. Set 1, easy to evaluate because there's so few cards that there's not really that many combinations that you can make. Set 2 comes along. We have established decks that we've been able to establish kind of what the most important cards are. However, set 3 shaking up kind of the identity of Star Wars Unlimited with this token theme and kind of involving a lot of other cards' power that didn't really matter before. Like, again, Mace Windu, one of the big problems with Mace Windu, let's compare it to Maul, for example. He comes down, he doesn't actually kill anyone. And so you can't even ready him. And his ambush effect is not that great because he didn't even kill a unit, right? Or if he is able to kill something, he just dies afterwards, immediately. If you look at like Maul, for example, he comes down, he kills something almost assuredly and deals damage to your opponent's base and usually sticks around. And that's one of the reasons why we don't see as much Mace Windu as we do something like Maul. But with set 3, this really makes a lot of sense. He's all about trying to clear out all the battle droids, keep continuously readying, and then just maybe hitting your opponent or hitting another important unit. So I'm really excited for this set. It's going to be really hard to evaluate, and I am excited for, well, all these cards that I talked about today. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I will see you all for a video soon.